The spotlight of a $1 million win and a Las Vegas megastrip residency promised him the world. But for Terry Fator, the man who threw his voice to stardom, the silence backstage was deafening. As his career skyrocketed, his personal life imploded in a maelstrom of divorce, financial ruin, and lawsuits, exposing a heartbreaking truth. The puppets that made him famous couldn't protect him from the demons that were silently destroying everything he had built. The puppets couldn't protect him. Neither could the $1 million prize nor the $100 million contract. When Terry Fator stood on that America's Got Talent stage in 2007, he was a man who had spent decades perfecting the art of making his voice seem to come from anywhere but himself. Yet, when his personal life began to crumble, there was no dummy to speak the words he couldn't say. The same voice that could channel Elvis Presley and Marvin Gaye with uncanny precision could not, it seemed, save him from the silence that had haunted him since childhood. Growing up in Dallas, Texas, Terry Fator discovered ventriloquism almost by accident. In 5th grade, he stumbled upon a book titled Ventriloquism for Fun and Profit by Paul Winchell, and something clicked. Within weeks, he'd purchased a Willie Talk dummy from Sears and won a $25 prize at a church picnic. It wasn't just a hobby, it was an escape. From the age of 10, Fator found refuge in his puppets, developing a skill that would eventually make him a household name. But as his talent grew, so did the shadow cast by his father's disapproval. His father, Jephthah, was an extreme religious zealot who, in Fator's own words, developed a messianic narcissistic complex where he began to believe that he was Christ on earth. Living in that household, Fator said, was like being trapped in a cult. His father never told him he was good, never acknowledged the talent that was so clearly there. He told me my whole life I was not talented, that I was good at convincing people I was talented, Fator later revealed. The psychological damage ran deep, creating a man who doubted his own worth even as he stood before millions and won the nation's heart. By the time he auditioned for America's Got Talent, Fator had already been performing for decades. He'd toured as the lead singer of bands, opened for Garth Brooks and Reba McEntire, and entertained crowds in venues both grand and humble. At one point, he even performed a show in a 1,000-seat theater attended by just one person. But as he approached his 40s, success still seemed tantalizingly out of reach. Then, in 2007, everything changed. If you're enjoying this story, subscribe so you never miss our next documentary. The triumph of that moment should have been everything he'd ever dreamed of. Instead, it became the catalyst for unraveling that no one saw coming. As Terry Fator walked off the stage of America's Got Talent with a $1 million prize in hand, Melinda Fator, his wife of nearly 2 decades, was quietly making a decision that would shatter the foundation of his personal life. Fator and Melinda had met in the late 1980s when she began following the band he fronted extensively. They married on January 8, 1991, and for nearly 18 years, she had been his anchor through the long, arduous climb to recognition. But fame, it seemed, had a different plan. After relocating to Las Vegas to prepare for his historic residency at the Mirage, the pressures of sudden celebrity began to fracture what had already been a troubled union. Fator later admitted that the marriage had soured long before it officially ended, confessing that we just didn't like each other. In January 2009, just weeks before he was set to open his show at the Mirage, Melinda made a decision that caught Fator off guard. She left Las Vegas and returned to Texas. By February, she had filed for divorce. For Fator, the timing was devastating. He was on the verge of signing a 5-year, $100 million contract, one of the largest entertainment deals in Las Vegas history. But behind the scenes, his personal life was disintegrating in slow motion. The woman who had followed his band across the country, who had supported him through years of obscurity, was now walking away just as the world was finally paying attention. What followed was a divorce battle that dragged on for nearly 2 years. Melinda filed a second time in Nevada in 2010, prolonging the legal proceedings and the emotional toll on both parties. The irony was painful. Fator had spent his entire life building a career around communication, making puppets speak and sing with such skill that audiences forgot they were looking at wood and fabric. Yet when it came to communicating with the most important person in his life, the words wouldn't come. Behind the scenes, another chapter was quietly unfolding. Just as the dust settled on his fractured marriage, a new storm was brewing behind the velvet curtains of the Mirage. The millions pouring in from the Vegas residency weren't just buying him freedom, they were attracting predators. In 2014, as Fator was cementing his status as one of the highest-paid comedians in the world, ranking number 2 on Forbes' list of top-earning comedians behind Jerry Seinfeld, an old wound was ripped open again. The legal dispute between Fator and his former manager, John McEntee, reignited with a fury that shocked the entertainer. Fator had terminated McEntee in December 2009, alleging fraud, manipulation, and self-dealing. According to Fator's lawsuit, McEntee had insinuated himself into virtually every aspect of Mr. Fator's career through deception, even designating himself as the contractual counterparty with the Mirage instead of Fator himself. When Fator began uncovering the alleged conflicts of interest, he initiated proceedings against McEntee, and the parties eventually reached a settlement in October 2010. But in July 2014, Fator filed a new lawsuit, accusing McEntee of returning with a remarkable display of avarice and greed to demand more money. Fator's complaint stated that McEntee had already received well in excess of $10 million in payments, and now he was back for more. The desperation behind Fator's legal filing was palpable. He wanted a judge to declare that these individuals were not entitled to continue their parasitic encumbrance of Mr. Fator's career. The man whose puppets had made millions was now spending millions just to keep the vultures at bay. Adding to the financial pressure was another lawsuit from John and Lori Raymond, who claimed Fator had breached their management contract and stiffed them for their 20% commission on his earnings. It seemed that everywhere Fator turned, someone was demanding a piece of the pie he had spent decades baking. The $100 million contract he signed in 2008 was supposed to be the ultimate vindication, proof that the janitor from Texas who had performed for empty theaters had finally arrived. Yet behind the curtain, he was discovering a painful truth. When you build your life around making everyone else happy, there are always people ready to cash in. If this story surprised you, share it with someone who would enjoy uncovering forgotten Hollywood stories. In a turn of events that felt scripted for a Hollywood comedy, Terry Fator's third chapter of love began in the most unexpected way, with his sister playing matchmaker. In April 2015, Fator was performing a charity event in his hometown of Corsicana, Texas, and his sister Debbie Beard had a very specific plan. She hired a caterer, not for the food, but with the singular intention of setting her brother up with Angela Fiore. What happened next stunned even those who knew him best. Fator and Angie began dating, and just a few months later, he did something that would have seemed unthinkable just years earlier. He proposed to Angie Fiore on stage in front of his ex-wife Taylor. The man who had spent a lifetime hiding behind puppets, who had been shattered by 2 failed marriages, was now laying his heart bare in front of a live audience. The proposal was symbolic of everything Fator had learned. For decades, he had used his voice to speak for everyone but himself. Characters like Winston the Turtle and Walter T. Airedale were his shields. But on that stage in Corsicana, with his ex-wife watching and his future wife before him, Terry Fator finally spoke his own words. He married Angie Fiore on September 4, 2015. Unlike the whirlwind that had followed his America's Got Talent victory, this time the spotlight didn't devour him. Angie wasn't just a partner, she became his anchor. The turbulent pattern of self-destruction that had marked his first 2 marriages, divorcing his wife of 18 years only to marry a 21-year-old model 24 hours later, had finally been broken. But the question remains, when a man who has spent his entire life making everyone else laugh finally finds his own voice, can he really keep what he's found? If you enjoyed this documentary, like the video and subscribe for more true celebrity stories every week. Nearly 2 decades after that triumphant night on the America's Got Talent stage, Terry Fator is still standing. The man who once performed to an audience of 1 now commands stages across North America with his Pure Imagination tour, a 90-minute spectacle that reminds audiences why they fell in love with him in the first place. His characters, Winston the impersonating turtle, Walter T. Airedale, Julius the Marvin Gaye-loving puppet, are still making crowds laugh, still defying the notion that ventriloquism is a dying art. But the numbers tell a story of survival that goes far beyond ticket sales. Estimates of his net worth vary wildly, with some sources placing it as high as $160 million while others suggest a more conservative $20 million. What's indisputable is that Terry Fator, who came from a childhood where his father told him he had no talent, has built an empire from nothing but his voice. And that voice, for the first time in his life, is finally his own. The lawsuits that once threatened to consume him have faded into the background. The marriages that crumbled, first to Melinda after 18 years, then to Taylor in a whirlwind that lasted just 5, are now chapters in a story that has found its footing. With Angie Fiore, the caterer his sister hired with an ulterior motive, Fator has discovered a partnership that doesn't dissolve under the pressure of fame. But perhaps the most remarkable part of his journey is this: Terry Fator is still performing, still creating, still proving his father wrong. Yet, as he steps onto yet another stage in Waterloo in New York, or Medford, Massachusetts, one question lingers in the silence between the applause. When you've spent a lifetime speaking through dummies, how do you know when you're finally saying the words that matter? In a turn that feels almost poetic, the man who once spoke only through puppets is now sharing his story on his own terms. Terry Fator's 2026 Pure Imagination Tour is not just another string of performances. It represents something far more personal, a creative rebirth born from the ashes of everything he lost. The title itself is a confession. Pure Imagination speaks to the inner world Fator retreated to as a child, a sanctuary where his father's cruel words couldn't reach him, where dummies could say what he couldn't, and where a boy from Texas could become anyone he wanted to be. Throughout my life, my imagination had spawned countless characters, song parodies and comedy skits, Fator explained, and I compiled them all together to give my audience a fun look into my creative psyche. The quote reveals something remarkable. After decades of hiding, the man himself is finally the subject. The tour brings back all the beloved characters: Winston the impersonating turtle, Walter T. Airedale, Julius, Dougie, Vicky, and the world's greatest Elvis impersonator, Maynard Tompkins. But he's also adding new impressions based on global icons: Willie Nelson, Michael Jackson, Justin Bieber, plus surprise guests. The man who once performed to an audience of one is now bringing his imagination to fans across North America, from Waukegan to Detroit, from Edmonton to Winnipeg, from Medford to Hampton Beach. The numbers on the ticket stubs are staggering, but the real story is what they represent: survival, reinvention, and a man finally comfortable in his own skin. Estimates of his net worth continue to vary wildly, from $20 million to $160 million, depending on the source, but one thing is clear: Terry Fator has built an empire from nothing but his voice. And that voice, for the first time in his life, is finally his own. If you enjoyed this documentary, like the video and subscribe for more true celebrity stories every week. The man who once performed to an audience of one is now filling theaters across North America, but the journey that brought him here is etched in every punchline and every note. The Pure Imagination Tour that crisscrosses the continent in 2026 is more than a collection of performances, it is a testament to survival. From Waukegan's Genesee Theatre to Detroit's MGM Grand, from Edmonton's Pearl Showroom to the OLG stage at Fallsview Casino, Fator is bringing his menagerie of characters to fans who have watched him rise, fall, and rise again. The tour's name, Pure Imagination, is itself an autobiography, a window into the mind of a boy who escaped a father's cruelty by creating worlds where voices could come from anywhere but himself. The numbers that follow Fator are as varied as his impressions. Some sources place his net worth at $160 million, while others cite a more conservative $20 million. But what the figures can't capture is the resilience of a man who weathered a childhood of psychological torment, 2 failed marriages, and legal battles that threatened to consume everything he built. The estimated $20 million annual earnings at his peak may have fluctuated, but his place in entertainment history is secure. He remains one of the few performers who transformed ventriloquism, a craft often dismissed as a novelty, into a mainstream phenomenon. Yet as Fator takes his bow in Winnipeg or Hampton Beach, a final question lingers in the silence between the applause. His father told him he had no talent. His first wife left as his career peaked. His second marriage lasted just 5 years. Now, with Angie Fiore by his side and a North American tour behind him, Terry Fator has finally found something his puppets never could, a voice of his own. But in a life built on making others laugh, can a man ever truly learn to laugh at himself?